Welcome to the honeypot project. We're here today to discuss Build 2. The focus of Build 2 has been threat intelligence. We should start by defining threat intelligence. So what is threat intelligence? Threat intelligence is evidence-based knowledge including context, mechanisms, indicators, implications, and actionable advice about an existing or emerging menace or hazard to assets that can be used to inform decisions regarding the subject's response to that menace or hazard. Now, what does that mean and how does that relate to our project? Right now in the project we have a lot of threat data. This data is just kind of out there. We have information about who's attacking us, but we don't really have any sort of context to put any of this evidence in. And it's kind of hard if we don't have any context to give any actionable advice. So what we're doing here, what we did in this iteration of the project build was to come up with mechanisms that we can create threat intelligence from all the data that we've collected. Quick statistics is that threat intelligence is a top priority for 75% of firms. And another diagram we have here is the relationship of data, information, and intelligence. So we can understand that right now we have a lot of data. We may even have some information. But what we're really looking for is intelligence. And how we get intelligence is we process and exploit the data that we've collected into analysis and production, and then we can get our intelligence out of that. So we're filtering the data, we're giving it context, we're doing an analysis on this data, and then what we're getting out is we're getting out actual threat intelligence. So currently we're using a modern honeypot network server to collect our log files from our sensors that we've deployed. These sensors are currently in Amazon VPS. Actually 2 Amazon VPSs, and we have a variety of these sensors deployed to try to catch attackers. This kind of gives you like a sense of the main screen for the web app for the modern honeypot network. It works to collect this information. It helps you to deploy sensors. You can define rules as far as what is and is not classified as an attack. Here's a diagram. This might explain things a little bit better. We have our sensors. They're all reporting to the Modern Honeypot Network server. The Modern Honeypot Network server has collected them through HP feeds. Then it's filtered through another application, Menmosign, I believe is how I'm. Excuse the pronunciation, but that program there. What that does is filter and process the logs before it sends it to MongoDB. Mongo is a non-SQL database, but it's very popular. And then that information we can obtain from the web app, which is what we had pictured in the previous screenshot there. But what we're really looking for is to forward this information through a REST API to a third-party app like Splunk or Kibana, so that we can do a little bit more analysis on the data and come to some conclusions from all these attacks. So one change to the design was that instead of using the ELK stack, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, moved to Splunk. Splunk does security monitoring. It provides a little bit better analysis than Kibana as far as for security alerts, and I thought it gave us a little bit better overall threat intelligence. The basic outline of how Splunk will work is that we have an attacker. He's going to hit our VPS systems and our sensors. They're going to generate log files, and these log files are going to be sent to a forwarder, which then they're going to be indexed and then sent to the Splunk server. where we can do some analysis on the data. To show you the Splunk deployment that we have. This is a virtual machine that I have set up on a VMware ESX server. The VPS systems that we have where the sensors are at, they send the logs back here, and then we can see our dashboard, which contains data that we've collected, but it also gives us a little bit of an analysis. You can see here that we have within the last 24 hours attacks are down. We've had 262 attacks, 35 unique attacks, and you can see by the hour what time of day is the most active and what time of day is not active. You can see the commands that they've executed, like how many unique commands, whether that's up or down. So this gives us this actually gives us a little bit of an analysis. We can actually come to some conclusions from this information, and not just reading through a bunch of log files and noticing that something happened. This gives us trends. This gives us context to what's going on. If we scroll down here, we can see a map. The map, this is for the last 24 hours. We can see where exactly the attacks are coming from, what countries, what cities, on what ports that they're attacking. Right now most of the attacks are coming from China and the United States. A very small percentage are coming from other countries like Korea. Vietnam pops up there quite frequently. We can see some of the cities that are the most active, Des Moines, Hebei, etc. We can see that our cowrie sessions and our P0F are the most active. However, we do get some shockpot events. If we scroll a little bit further down, we can see some more information. We can see who are our top attackers, like which IP addresses are we getting the most traffic from, how many hits do they have. You can even see a spark line, like when are they the most active within the last 24 hours. Once again, we have our top sensors, we have signature information, and this is very important. We have what are the top username and passwords that are being used here. So with SSH, like what's the usernames that are being the most often used? Pi. That's the default username for a Raspberry Pi. That's definitely why they're using that. You can see that the top SSH password for the last 24 hours is Raspberry. If you're familiar with Raspbian, which is the Linux distribution that's popular on Raspberry Pis, the default username and password is Pi and the Pi Raspberry. UBNT, and UBNT is another popular one. Those are wireless devices. We actually have some at my work that go between buildings. They're more industrial grade. So UBNT, Ubiquity Networks, I believe is what they're called. But those are industrial grade wireless devices. That's the default username and password for those. You can see some of the other usernames that are quite popular, which is Zimbra, Web, Sammy, along with the passwords. One other thing of note here on the front dashboard here is that we have like the versions of Linux and Windows, the operating systems that we're getting the most attacks from. Most of the attacks are coming from Linux with a kernel version of 3.11 or later, followed by Linux with a kernel version of 3 to 3.10. Very few attacks coming from any other types of systems. We can also filter by all time. We can go from week to date. This provides us with a little bit more information here. A little bit different map. Let's look at an individual sensor. This is our Cowrie analytics. Now this is the actual sensor that it's an SSH sensor. This is the one that they are logging into and playing around with. This is the sensor that creates a virtual environment for the attacker to play in. We kind of showed you that last time where the attacker logs into a virtual environment and then executes commands. Also, we have botnets that are logging in and executing their commands. Once again, you can see the top username and passwords. Admin, admin123, admin password, Zimbro12345. These are all web apps that are popular, and their username and passwords is typically one thing that you can use from an analysis from this, if you weren't aware already, is that I would highly recommend that you change the default password. 100% that's going to definitely make you a harder target to hit. They run through all the default passwords that you could possibly think of, and derivatives such as admin, admin123 password, 123 web1, web2. Like I said, definitely change the default password, make it unique, make it a hard password to guess. Use special characters, and that will definitely keep you away from having some of these attacks. We have also the top attackers, what country they're coming from. Looks like our top one for today was from Germany. We have the count of 32 from the United States. We have China, we have Canada. China is typically the number one that I've seen as far as attacks coming from. This is analysis that we've had from using Splunk and seeing where the attacks are coming from instead of just reading individual logs. It is a hot environment there for attacks and for botnets. This is our Shockpot analytics. Shockpot basically runs on port 80, port 8080, and it's looking for shell shock exploits. May not be familiar with those, but they've become quite popular. We can see the Shockpot events here, what countries they're coming from, what ports they're happening on. Typically they happen on port 80. They can happen on a few other ports, but we can actually look at some of these logs here right in the dashboard for this. Our top sensor indicates which one is picking this information up, and that's an overview of Splunk in a nutshell. What Splunk really does is it takes all the data that we've collected, and what Splunk does is it gives us a little bit of perspective. It gives us context to these information. You'd obviously want to know things such as, am I having more attacks in the last few days than I did previously? Or some of the is my firewall working better after I made a change? Is it not working better? Are any of the other controls that I've put in place, have they had any sort of an effect on what's going on? It's important, and that's that's the point of Splunk, is to give you that type of analysis, not just raw data. Well, the last thing that we're going to talk about is our setup for our high interaction honeypot. We've made a couple configuration changes, and now what we have is we have something a little bit different. I set up a VPS on Amazon that's actually located in Ireland. Um, and when an attacker comes into this server, what it's going to do is going to send it to a server that's local that I actually have on my own network here. Um, there's a layer 2 tunnel set up between my network and this VPS in Ireland. And we're going to perform a man-in-the-middle attack so that we can monitor this connection between Ireland and here. And what that's going to do is that's going to send the attacker is going to log into the system. It's going to send him to our local system, and he won't really know the difference. And at that point, what we can do is on our local side, we can keep spinning up these high interaction honeypots because they will get infected with botnets and stuff, so we will be taking them off the network, but it'll be a little bit easier to keep track of them if we can just spin them up on a ESX box here that I have locally. That will make it a little bit more manageable. Otherwise we'd have to break down and reinstall like our VPS like on Amazon. That's not very efficient, so I have an image here, a good image, so that I can constantly spin these high interaction honeypots up and connect them back to Ireland so that we can get some real information. So I wanted to show you that we have indeed created a VPS in Ireland. The choice of Ireland was I had less latency connecting to Ireland and Europe in general as opposed to Mumbai or Tokyo. I gave Mumbai a try, but that was a little, I had far too high latency with that connection for that to work. So I wanted to demonstrate to you how this works. I actually have I have the layer 2 tunneling protocol set up here, and what we're going to do is we're going to connect to that. Now we're connected. So if we open our web browser, and to verify that we are indeed connected to an Irish web server, we're going to go to Google, and then we're going to go to the news. This is actually a relatively interesting way to find out where you are in the world. I noticed this last time that I was in Europe, that it started to pull up the local Google News. We can see that we are indeed reading Google, but this isn't just Google the United States. This is in Ireland, so we're obviously going to be getting Irish news. And there you go. So we've connected using the layer 2 tunneling protocol to Ireland. So I just wanted to demonstrate to you how that works, how we set up our VPN. And now what we can do is we can set up this VPN to work with our high interaction honeypot servers so that when an attacker does go to our server in Ireland, he's going to be redirected. We're going to perform a man-in-the-middle attack on that connection, which should be on port 22. I believe it also works at port 23. So it's going to sit in the middle between that connection and watch the traffic going to our high interaction honeypot. Okay, so we're going to show you the service that runs our man-in-the-middle attack. On the right side of the screen, I have up the server in Ireland. So I'm going to start that service. Okay, so we're ready for attacks, and on the left side I have a machine here on my local network, and we're going to observe the address is 192.168.1.18, and what we're going to do is we're going to SSH into our server in Ireland. and it is going to forward us back to my own local MacBook, which I'm actually working on right now, and we can check our IP address here, and you can see that our IP address is definitely changed. And our current IP address is 192.168.1.4. If you notice previously, when we first ran this command, you can see that the address of the server that we were on was 1.18. Then we put in our IP address for the server in Ireland, which is 34.251.75.166, and we are now back on my own local network again, on a different computer. And you can see on the right hand side of the screen that every command that I run here, I can see on the right hand side of the screen. This logs every command that you do, and then sends it back to HP feeds on the MHN server. So I will be able to use that with Splunk again, so we can get some analysis going on and put the attacks into context. This is a little bit different because this is not sending me to a virtual environment. This is sending me to an actual computer. So what we're doing is basically setting a SSH proxy. It's going to sit in the middle between our high interaction honeypot and our server in Ireland. And so what we're looking to accomplish here is that we're going to set up a bunch of these Sysdig Falco honeypots, high interaction honeypots, and then our server in Ireland is just going to take the connection and connect to a honeypot on our local network here, so that we can get a lot more information. It's a little bit more dangerous, but we should get quite a bit more usable information from the malware itself. So that's what we're going to be doing going forward into last month. That's kind of the last thing that we have going on. As far as our plans here is to set up this high interaction honeypot. Okay, I just want to show you a quick diagram of that last attack that we just did. Basically, the attacker logged into our Irish VPS, which was forwarded to our local VPS here. What this is an IPSec VPN. We're using layer 2 tunneling protocol over this VPN connection, and that's how that worked. So finally, let's talk about any changes that we had to our previous design. Previously, we expected to use Elasticsearch and Kibana to do our log analysis. That proved to be kind of more difficult, I would say, than expected. A lot of the visualizations didn't turn out as we wanted it to. Splunk was just a lot better fit. It's made to work with security monitoring. So when it all came together, as far as wanting to look at weekly or daily trends, and exfiltrating the data from the logs, Splunk did a lot better job. It was a lot more seamless than using the elk stack. It's not to say that the elk stack is bad. It's open source. So if you ever had a licensing problem or had too much information, Splunk might not work, because at that point you'd have to purchase an enterprise license for Splunk, which is pretty pricey from what I recall. It is free if it's under 500 megabytes of log data per day, so that's how I'm able to get by with that. But if you didn't have an enterprise license for that, then you might have to turn to the elk stack. The main difficulty with the ALK stack, which I played around with, is the actual filtering of the log files. In order to get them to be indexed into Elasticsearch, you have to write lengthy parsers. So that can be a little bit difficult when working with some of the different sensors that we have. So that was a big difficulty that I encountered. Was parsing the information. Even parsing the information from the log files into Splunk can be somewhat difficult, although it was easier than using the ALK stack. So that was our biggest difficulty this week. To go over that again, we reiterate that I wanted to get threat intelligence, meaning stuff that's in context and analyzed, instead of just having all this raw data. I think that is very important. It might not be the most interesting of these videos. Like we did have some more attacks that occurred that were rather interesting, but we'll probably wait for next video to speak about those. The sprint schedule for the final build will be to finally get some information from this man-in-the-middle attack that we're using with the Irish VPS. Would like to have hopefully a real attacker, but more likely a botnet will log into our Irish VPS, and then it will be forwarded to our local machine, which is high interaction honeypot. So I'm hoping to have I'm actually hoping to have the botnet work and infect the computer. At that point, I'll have log files, very detailed log files on how the botnet actually deploys and works, and I will have the files and anything else the botnet does, or downloads, or anything else of that matter. So it won't be able to get very far, but it will definitely be infected, and will attempt to probably communicate with this command and control server, which I'm looking forward to, so I can see how some of these modern botnets are functioning with their command and control servers. It's much different than what it was a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, they were using mostly IRC for the botnets to communicate. Apparently nowadays it's gone pretty wild, and there's a lot of even we'll say roll your own protocols that people have developed, or protocols specific for the botnet. So that should be relatively interesting. That's what we have coming up for the next is for this deployment, and then to comb through the data that we get from the high interaction honeypots. That should provide some very good information, and also probably do a little bit more log analysis. We also, this turn, we deployed a couple new honeypot sensors. These sensors are, one of them is called WordPot. The WordPot is a WordPress server that collects information. A lot of the times, if you're looking at targeting a machine, you will try to find as much information you can off their web page. So what WordPot does is WordPot creates a fake WordPress site which people can actually hack into and gain relevant information about your system, but it also monitors what kind of plugins that they try to install for WordPress. So I haven't gotten too much information off of that one. Also deployed a shell shock honeypot called Shockpot. That's looking for people trying to run shell exploits. That's quite popular nowadays. Have had some good information from that. And also a P0F sensor, which picks up what type of operating system the attackers have. So we've gotten some good information off of that. I think for the most part we've gotten the log analysis sorted out, and I actually have a lot better picture of what's occurring now than I did previously, as far as where the attacks are coming from, what the most common username and passwords are. It even gives me the top 50 commands that once the botnets are on the system that they're running. So it's quite a bit of good information as far as what's going on. So might not be the flashiest video, but like I said, it's probably one of the more important videos, so that you can have actionable information to provide with your client with, which is ultimately the reason why we're running these honeypots, is that I can give them actionable intelligence. The secondary reason would be is that they are a sinkhole. I think some of the other videos have proven that they are quite an effective sinkhole as far as wasting an attacker's time, especially our friend NASA Paul. So, other than that, hope you guys have a good month, and we will talk to you next time.